Hi guys, welcome to the channel. My name's Chris Wright. I'm a landscape photographer working in Granada, Spain. Now, do you ever wake up in the morning and think that you've maybe been doing photography wrong? I woke up recently thinking that, and I had a good sort of think about it, and I've come to a few conclusions which I thought I'd share with you here today. Okay, so what is behind this feeling? It's more than simply sort of common or garden imposter syndrome. This is something that's really quite fundamental. And I wanted to really have a talk about that in the context of what artificial intelligence means for photographers, what social media means for photographers, how photographers market themselves, and regardless of whether they're professional photographers working for a living or whether they're photographers that are doing it out of a love for photography or fine art photographers, we still need to have our photographs seen and we still need to share our photographs. And I wanted to have a little chat about the ramifications of that in 2025, really. So let's start with the really thorny one. Let's start with artificial intelligence. Now, we've all seen there's a massive debate sort of going on and off on social media platforms, and maybe it would have been wiser to have started with social media platforms, but let's cut straight to the chase. Let's go to AI first. And broadly, the camps are polarizing. There are those that say no AI at all, there are those that say embrace it. In the middle of all this, you've got large companies like Adobe who, and I paraphrase slightly, if photographers fail to embrace AI, they will die. It's as simple as that. So, in other words, Adobe is setting their stall out saying artificial intelligence is the future, and we're going to load our software with artificial intelligence which will not just help photographers to process their pictures better, but will do it on its own on the basis of understanding the process that has been performed by hundreds of thousands of photographers whose pictures it's been trained on. Now, I think there's a real fundamental flaw in this presumption that AI is going to do it better, because I can see that a lot of the work that I used to do in terms of product photography is pretty much redundant in these days of artificial intelligence. We can photograph a bottle of wine against a white background, we can then get AI to superimpose that onto any set that we want to dream up. That's it's not rocket science, it's AI. So I can see how this is really going to affect photographers' livelihoods, and actually for the first time I'm quite grateful that I'm as old as I am, because my career is largely behind me and not in front of me, and the onus to make the money is no longer quite as pressing as it was. Now, the flaw that I see in artificial intelligence is the flaw of innovation. I don't get, and I'm perfectly open to being corrected on this, but I don't get how artificial intelligence is supposed to innovate, because it's using the work of thousands and thousands of photographers, and yes, it can understand where shadows should fall, it can understand how to get rid of reflections, all of this stuff that's already in the software if you know how to use it. Artificial intelligence will be able to simply run it as a macro in the background and will be none the wiser as to what's happening. And further than that, artificial intelligence is capable of introducing new objects that weren't even photographed into the equation. So, all well and good, it can produce photographs that kind of look like the sort of thing that people used to aspire to on Instagram, particularly in the realms of travel photography. I'm seeing photographs that are quite frankly unbelievable, and when I look at them more closely, I see why they're unbelievable, and it's because, you know, the shadows are in the wrong place, or the horse has got 3 feet, or, you know, there are endless little clues as to when a photograph has been made with artificial intelligence. But I'm kind of digressing. What I want to get to here is this feeling of inadequacy, I guess, that is brought on by the ushering in by the big corporations of all of this technology and the force feeding of that technology to photographers. And I think that I was always a very technical photographer, so for me the challenge was always about learning how to do stuff and getting that down. When I was a commercial photographer, you had to aim for perfection, and therefore there was no rough and ready. There was no sort of back to basics about it. It was absolutely deliver the most perfect picture you're capable of photographing. And for the latter half of my career, I was able to do that successfully to the point where I got paid what I would consider to be pretty reasonably well to do that. And so that kind of worked really well for me. But I wonder now, if I was still doing those shoots, would I be tempted to bring in the help of AI assistants in a program like Adobe Lightroom? Now, if we break this down, I think what we're seeing is a fairly insidious process that has started with the, I guess, the enhanced accessibility of quite complex processing. Now, the best example of this I've seen is Lightroom masks. Adobe Lightroom masks are very easy to use, they're very easy to understand, and unsurprisingly, photographers have jumped onto them with relish. And I think I've used them myself, I use the equivalent in other software. What they actually are behind the scenes is nothing new. It's enhanced usability, it's nothing more. The idea of intersecting masks has been around in Photoshop for a long time. It's available in Affinity Photo today, and creating those effects simply requires that you understand what it is that you want the software to do. Now, this is something that's always been quite close to my heart because of my background in technology. I worked as a consultant for a very large computing company for 15 years back in the past. And so I built an understanding of how software works that has been invaluable to me in photography. So I can look at something like Adobe Lightroom, other software packages, and know more or less what it's fair for me to expect it to be able to do, and put that in the context also of how much development budget these companies have, because creating software is expensive. So there's a point of view that says smaller companies cannot be expected to progress with artificial intelligence as fast as people like Adobe. And there is also a point of view that says, should we be questioning what Adobe are feeding to us? Because for me, at this stage in my career, and at this age, this maturity as a photographer, I know how to create anything that I'm going to want or I'm going to need from artificial intelligence. Now let's qualify that a little bit. I'm a landscape photographer, and one of the things that is key to me is realism. And I like to enhance realism. I use the processing tools in order to draw the audience's or the single viewer's eye into the photograph, so that they will look at the things that I want them to look at. And that is part of visual storytelling. The initial part, of course, is the composition itself, but within that composition, you're telling a story about some element of the composition. And I feel that I have the tools to do that in the software that I choose to use. Now, it is not arguable that I can't do this quicker using Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom, using the artificial intelligence tools there. And I'm sure there are lots more things rolling down the runway as I speak. But my position as a photographer is I want it to be me that creates. I want it to be me that innovates within the context of what I'm photographing and what I'm processing. And this, to some people, might seem like a Luddite attitude. It's not really that very much different from the people who insist that shooting on film and processing on film is the only true photography. I disagree with that perspective. I was taught to, I was raised, when I was at film school, film was all we had. So I kind of know how to do that, although I must say I've forgotten more about it than it's possible to quantify, probably. But certainly I embrace digital photography. I like digital cameras, I like the look of it, and I like the amount of control that I can exert on it with current processing tools. So that's artificial intelligence, and that's my position. I think artificial intelligence is something we should be very, very wary of in photography, because there is no question that it is going to affect the marketplace. It's going to affect our ability to market ourselves and our services to the audience that we had even 5 years ago. So I think that the audience for commercial photography is shrinking, and that work is going to artificial intelligence-driven applications. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of where the profit goes and where the money goes. All I know is that I'm not capable of earning that money now today, and that I should be looking at other income streams. Now, the second part of this that I wanted to discuss was social media. And there's been a sea change in social media. What has happened in the last probably 18 months is nothing less than horrifying to me. So much so that I cancelled my account on Twitter, where I had 5,500 followers, and have moved across to Threads, where I have a couple of hundred followers at present. I like Threads a lot more. I'm having conversations with other photographers, which is great, so that's working in more or less the same way that Twitter used to work for me. What I don't like so much about Threads is that it's owned by a single individual who has distinct political ideas, and they're not in tune with my own political ideas, and so I'm quite suspicious of where Threads is going. So to compare where Elon Musk, his influence on Twitter was extreme. He went in on day one and said, right, I'm going to restore, under the banner of freedom of speech, I'm going to restore the voice of all of these nutcases. And that's not happening on Threads, no mistake. What I do find that I disagree with, though, is that Mark Zuckerberg, who also owns Facebook, owns Instagram, owns Threads, has stipulated that political content will be stifled on Threads. So write about politics at your at your leisure. Nobody's going to read it on Threads. And some people might say that's a good thing. The other part of this, of course, is Instagram. Instagram has traditionally been the way that photographers get their photography in front of an audience. And I had a commercial, when I was doing commercial photography in the UK, I had an account there which was pretty successful, several hundred followers. I can't remember exactly how many, but it was getting my photography out to companies, and that was helping me to bring in customers. There's no question about that. When I came to Spain, I opened a new account as Chris Wright Photography to showcase my landscape photography and sort of fine art photography, such as it is. And I found that was a complete disaster. Instagram, my reach has disappeared, my audience never built, and I find it very, very difficult to get any traction on Instagram these days. And I do not want to make reels. Not my thing at all. I'm much more of a sort of reflective personality, and I like to discuss things in depth as I'm doing now. It's not real, it's not real RWL material. So that's where I find myself now. Where the opportunities have opened up for me in terms of social media are other platforms. So I have an account on Mastodon, I have my own server instance on Mastodon. I find a much friendlier audience there, a larger audience who are interacting very well, very nicely and kindly. There is none of the bitterness, none of the negativity and aggression that we're beginning to see filter into threads. I've also got an account on Blue Sky, and I'm enjoying Blue Sky, but I'm not feeling the personal connections that I'm making on Threads. And I think Threads is by far the most promising in terms of what I'm experiencing right now. I just have reservations about where it's going to go. And to come back full circle to the artificial intelligence thing, what I'm seeing on both Threads and Instagram is that the algorithms are being programmed to steer the content in the way that the person who controls it wants it to be steered. Now, Elon Musk has done this on Twitter to a much greater extent and a much more obvious extent. You try going on Twitter and not seeing a tweet from Elon Musk. It is impossible. He pushes his own content explicitly. Mark Zuckerberg, thankfully, is not doing this on Threads. Fingers crossed Threads is not going to go the same way as Instagram. That would be a real travesty. If it does, I have got Mastodon in my back pocket, so to speak, and it's not going to take a great deal to make me jump to there. But I think what we might be looking at is a much more fractured landscape. I think there will be more platforms. People have tried to emulate Instagram and failed broadly. I had an account on a platform called Vero. Very good looking, beautifully represented photographs. It really looked lovely. The account didn't go anywhere. It was very hard to get traction on it. I'm finding more traction again on Threads. So I think, to probably draw this conversation to a close, on a note of optimism, I feel that it's time that photographers took back control and stopped trying to play the algorithms. The one thing that I really detest about social media, or corporate social media, is this temptation is to try to second guess the algorithm and to talk about things that will get more reach and so on and so forth. And this has become so stifling that to be successful at it requires several hours input a day. And hey, at the end of the day, I'm a photographer. I don't really want to be, my job is not content creator on social media. My job is photographer. That's what I want to do. And in the new year, I'm going to be creating a lot more content. Some of that content will find its way into social media and into the instructional videos that I do on YouTube. and hopefully we'll all be the better for it. I'd love to know what you guys think about this, particularly people that are, you know, mid-career to late career, whether your experience has matched mine, if you're experiencing issues that I haven't noticed. Put a comment in the space down below. That would be fantastic. I'd quite like to get a conversation going about these topics. So let's have a go at that. Have a great new year, a great 2025, everybody, and we'll see you next week with a different type of video. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.